All right. Good morning, Western Pacific students. Welcome to a recording of your lecture videos. I will start the first recording. Basically, 15-minute videos. So you have 4 videos for one topic. So the first topic that we're going to cover for today's classes is the introduction to the PNG legal system. All right. So when PNG became independent in 1975, September 16, when we became independent, basically before September 16, there was a committee called the Constitutional Planning Committee that was sent out to basically do a collection of views throughout the length and breadth of Papua New Guinea about what type of country they want Papua New Guinea to become. So they went around to all the little villages, centers, provincial towns, now as you know them, to collect views on the type of country they wanted PNG to become, the democratic setup, the system of laws, everything in the nature. So this committee consisted of great men like Dr. John Momis, Sir Michael Sumari was the chair, Matiabe Yui, and other Papua New Guineans. So they went, they sort of engaged the views of the people on the type of democratic country PNG is going to become, and they produced a report called the Constitutional Planning Committee Report. That CPC report basically is a blueprint of the democratic system of Papua New Guinea. You will find a copy of the report on the website that I have placed. Now, in the sort of recommendations, it was adopted in 1975, and basically PNG is a constitutional democracy. So when we say constitutional democracy, it means that the constitution is supreme law. Basically, it provides for the separation of powers, it provides for human rights, it provides for the national goals and directive principles. Talks about the hierarchy of laws, the principle of government, the arms of government, separation of powers, the lawmaking process, constitutional offices, electoral process, provincial local government, state services, and recently it was amended to cater for the Bougainville sort of referendum and Bougainville push for independence. All right, the next slide, you would note that I give you some definitions of what law is. So when we talk about trying to give an exact definition to the law, it's a very complex task. So to better your understanding of what are the parameters, what are the ambits of the law, I'm sort of highlighting to you certain sort of definitions given by very renowned law experts in the common law as well as in Papua New Guinea. All right, the famous United Kingdom scholar Sir William Blackstone, leading jurist of his time, basically defined law as a rule of civil conduct prescribed by supreme power in the state, commanding what is right and prohibiting what is wrong. All right. Then it's the definition followed by another British scholar by the name of John Austin, who basically states that law was set by political superiors to political inferiors, and that the law was a rule laid down for the guidance of an intelligent being by another intelligent being having power over it. All right, that's from the UK sort of perspective. Now let's look at the common law perspective that's been adopted in Papua New Guinea and what some professors of law or knowledgeable people in the law have said about law in Papua New Guinea. So in PNG, Dr. Mange Matui, the Executive Dean of Professor Mange Matui, the Executive Dean of the School of Law and now the Secretary for the Constitutional Law Reform Commission, basically defines law as general rules that govern or control social behavior. All right. While Luluaki and James in their book state that law is a system or body of rules and methods made or evolved for guiding, regulating, and controlling behavior, conducting activities, transactions in relation to human organized society. All right, so when you see the definition, you would begin to appreciate some sort of important aspects. First and foremost is the very fact that law governs people's behavior. Basically, law does not exist, or law does not apply in a vacuum. The law has to always apply to some sort of subordinates. So in that way, it means that when society sort of congregated, they left the lifestyle of hunting and gathering, they moved into societies, and there needed to be some sort of code to regulate how people behave. Behavior says that you cannot fight another person, you cannot steal another person's property. All these sort of behaviors have to be regulated. As a result, we now come to see law as rules that govern or control social behavior. And as a result, the law is not a standalone sort of element. It is a system, or it's a body of rules and methods, and for regulating and controlling behavior, conduct, activities by human beings. So basically, if you look at the definition, law is supposed to regulate and conduct the control behavior in a society. All right, now you see the rule of law. Many times you would hear people talk about the rule of law. In the last couple of weeks, the PNG Law Society has been very vocal and very active, led by the president, Mr. Hubert Nyamani. He was very adamant that we must adhere to the rule of law. People must comply with the rule of law. So what is the rule of law? All right, Professor Albert Van Dyce basically states that the rule of law is the absolute supremacy or predominance of regular law. The law must be supreme. The law must dominate. The law must exhibit very stringent powers that provoke and that demands compliance. Law must be dominant in any society. People must live under the law and within the confines of the law. That's the one aspect of the rule of law. And the second aspect is that there must be equality before the law. Every person under a democratic system must be equal in the eyes of the law. The common thief and the politician. For instance, you remember a couple of times in Parliament when the Governor for Isipik, Mr. Alan Baird, was basically querying why a common criminal was being shot on the street for stealing hundreds and thousands of kina, while a member of parliament who steals millions and billions is walking away. So in other words, this statement is sort of an example and a reflection of the fact that there is no equality of law in Papua New Guinea. There's one set of laws for the poor, and there's one set of laws for the rich and those that sort of exercise power. So there is a direct contradiction of what the rule of law is. The rule of law states that all persons are subject and equal to the law. All right, you also see that I've sort of highlighted the works of Dr. Virgin Narakobi. Dr. Virgin Narakobi is a PhD holder in law and also a current judge of the National Supreme Court. So he basically states that the rule of law is considered as an important element of a fair and functioning society. The rule of law means that the government must be carried out by the predetermined rules of engagement and should not be made up along as we go. It tries to avoid the arbitrary judgment of rulers. The same rule governs the ruled and the ruler. The ruler should not change the rules whenever they feel like it. Rule of law is a concept of principle which guides the way government behaves on its own. It is not law but takes expression in various sections of the Constitution. For example, Section 55, equality before the law. So according to Section 55, everyone is equal before the law. You cannot have two sets of law. If everybody is to be punished by the same law, everybody must be punished. So this is what it means by the rule of law. It's the absolute supremacy, predominance of regular law, and it's equality before the law. All right, we now look at the separation of powers. So the separation of powers concept was a concept that was given prominence, or the founding father of the concept was a Frenchman called Baron de la Montesquieu. And Montesquieu basically was the one that invented separation of powers for all powers of government to be separate. He stated that yes, the government has powers to be exercised, but we cannot leave one sort of arm or body to exercise all the powers. Democracy and the separation of powers came from the fact that back in the day, the king was judge, jury, and executioner. That means that the king could make laws, the king could punish anyone, and the king could sit as judge in any case. So the right to rule and the right to dispense of justice, or dispense with justice, was a royal inheritance. When you became king, or when you became the monarch in the instance, you are the one that exercised power. So what happened was the people pushed that no, there must be a separate exercise of power. That's where the concept of parliament came about. and that's where the concept of the powers of government came about. So the government separated from the royal family. Now, when you look at all these things, you would know that the basic sort of principle in the separation of powers is that powers must be kept separate. The arms of government must be divided. All right, so in the common law, it's called separation of powers, and in PNG, the provision that adopts the separation of power principle is Section 99. So if you look at the PNG Constitution, it's also available in PECLI, you would see that Section 99 talks about the very fact that the powers of government must be separated between the executive, that's the Governor General Head of State, the NEC, and the Prime Minister. NEC is the National Executive Council, the Prime Minister and NEC are ministers, and then the judiciary is the court, police, and lawyers, and then the legislature is the national parliament. So these are the separate arms of government. The Supreme Court, in that case, basically, that I've said above, gives you a very exhaustive definition of what separation of powers is. The Supreme Court says that it is clear from the structure that the Constitution contemplates a general separation of powers between the three principal arms of government. So there are three principal arms of government. Basically, the separation cannot be rigid, but the separation principle remains basically present in the Constitution. And the most important thing is that it prohibits incursion of one arm of the government upon basic functions of the other. So what is this incursion we're talking about? Do you remember the time when Sir Michael Somare was voted out? Basically, what happened in that case was that the courts of Papua New Guinea, they found that Somare was illegally and unlawfully removed from that position, you see. As a result, that's a classic example of the interpretation of the Constitution. So, even though Parliament took an action, that action was not applicable to everyone. The courts had the power to review that action, and the court stated that no, the Parliament does not have the power to remove Prime Minister Sir Michael Somare. He is still the Prime Minister. So these sort of systems exist in simple terms for checks and balances. So the Prime Minister cannot go to the Chief Justice and say that, you know, I have interest in this case. This is how you should decide this case. No, Prime Minister cannot go and do that. All right, the Chief Justice cannot go and tell the Prime Minister that, you know, you have to pass this law. No. So the powers of government are separate and remain independent. All right, in the next class, we are going to cover next set of lecture videos. We're going to cover the human rights aspects of the